What's happening, everyone? This episode of the podcast is sponsored by 101 CBD, the makers of premium full-spectrum raw CBD oil products. So all of their sublingual tinctures, the Alleviate that helps with pain and inflammation, the Chill that helps me get a better night's sleep, and the Boost, which just helps me, just with my mental clarity throughout the day. All of those come in some really great flavors, and my favorites are the blueberry and the citrus. They've come out with a brand new flavor. It's called Tropical Bliss, and I really like it. It's got this pineapple, coconut citrus flavor to it. It's really nice, man. And 101 CBD wants to invite you to come into any of their retail stores and try it out. They have one in Omaha, Nebraska, one in Denver, Colorado, one in Ojai, California, and now they have 2 stores in Ventura, California. They just opened up a new one at 1121 South Seaward Avenue. That is right on the beach. Really nice location. So if you can, come on in and try that new flavor, the Tropical Bliss. In the meantime, if you can't make it into the stores, go over to 101cbd.org, order yourself some full-spectrum raw CBD oil, and don't forget to use coupon code IMGS25 so you can get 25% off of that order. All right, now let's start the show. So what's happening, mis amigos, my friends? This is the In My Grow Show. I'm your host, Alex, and I want to thank you once again for joining me. Now, a little later on Cannabis Garden 101, I'm going to talk about soil. It is not going to be on male-female plants, as I said, but I'll explain more about that in a little bit. But before that, I want to talk about a few things. So a couple of days ago, I went to go give blood, and the nurse who was taking my blood told me that in a couple of weeks, I can go onto the blood bank website and check to see if I have COVID-19 antibodies. Because apparently she was telling me they test the blood for antibodies so that when they get donations that have the antibodies, they send that blood out to places, I don't know, where people need the antibodies. I guess they do I don't know if they do a whole, transfusion. Or if they just, give everybody a shot of blood that has antibodies so people don't get it. And it sounded like from what she was telling me that most of the places they send it to are like hospitals or assisted living facilities, or old folks' homes, since they're the ones that are, most at risk. Another thing she told me was that one of the reasons why some people have the antibodies out here in California is because an early wave of COVID went through the West Coast back in November, December, January. So she said that's why right now some people are showing up that they have the antibodies for it. So anyways, I thought that was cool. A couple of weeks, I'm going to go on the website, see if I've got the antibodies, which would tell me that I had COVID back in the wintertime. Now, what's going on in my grow? I chopped down my mystery girl finally. I did it, I didn't wait the week. I think I scoped her Monday or Tuesday and I gave it the big chop. If you follow me on social media, I posted up a picture on Instagram just before I chopped her down about what she looked like. And you can find us at In My Grow Show over there if you want to follow us and take a look at that picture. But yeah, I gave her the big chop. Hung her up in the corner of the barn. I'm trying to keep the humidity between about 65 and 54%. Because at that humidity level, it allows the chlorophyll to kind of move its way and evaporate out of the bud as it's drying. And I'm going to leave her hanging up in the barn, 7-10 days to dry out. And then after that, I'm going to trim the bud and put it to cure for another, 7 to 10 days, maybe longer. So, we'll see how that works out, and I'll keep you posted. Now, I want to read an excerpt of a book called Marijuana Reconsidered. It was written back in 1971 by Dr. Lester Grinspoon. And it says, few drugs in the United States have produced as much effective heat as cannabis, particularly during the last decade. The controversy essentially revolves around the question of how dangerous or safe the drug is. The established belief views marijuana as an addicting drug that leads to personality deterioration and psychosis and criminal behavior and sexual excess. For many, its use seems to forebode such a catastrophe to the individual, and only laws that are draconian in intent and execution will contain the threat. This view is epitomized in several of the southern states. Georgia, for example, where the first offense for the transfer of sale of marijuana from an older person to one below the age of 21 carries a penalty of life imprisonment. And that was written in 1971. I mean, that could have been written, a couple of weeks ago. And the reason I wanted to read that is because Dr. Lester Grinspoon actually passed away this past week. And if you've never read the book before, Marijuana Reconsidered, I think you should take the time and read it. The guy had a lot of really awesome things to say. And again, he wrote this back 50 years ago, man. And some of the propaganda and stigma that he points out in the book are still around today. Another book that he wrote back in 1993 is called Marijuana, the Forbidden Medicine. And I just want to take a moment and thank Dr. Lester Grinspoon for all the work that he did. And our condolences go out to his family. Now, if you want to familiarize yourself with the kind of work that he did, Leafly wrote a really good article about him recently. So go over there and check it out. I don't have the link for it, unfortunately. You're just going to have to, yell into your phone, Leafly, Dr. Lester Grinspoon. And that article should just pop up. All right. Now let's move on to the strain of the week. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Blue Frost, which is a hybrid of the Blue Monster and the Jack Frost, and is an indica-dominant cross. Now the flavor was an interesting combination with like a sweet fruitiness with some cheesy aftertaste. And the high itself was pretty mellow, it wasn't a very heavy hitter. It was a nice euphoric smoke, For me, it was a really nice way to like end the busy part of the day, kind of like around after dinner. There you go. It's like a nice after dinner smoke, and rounded out the day real nicely. Didn't make me too sleepy, didn't make me too hyped up, even though it was an indica. So it was really nice. The Blue Frost, when you see it out there, give it a chance, man. All right, now since it is the end of June, oh man, next weekend's the 4th of July. That kind of just snuck up on me. I don't know if I'm ready for 4th of July. Do I have enough charcoal for the barbecue? Are we getting fireworks this year? Are you allowed to get fireworks where you live? I know I'm not. But the question is, are we getting fireworks? I don't know yet. Like I said, just kind of snuck up on me. Okay. Getting back to, as it is, the end of June, let's go look at the cannabis benchmark prices. And these are the benchmark prices for legal cannabis sales in America. And this benchmark chart came from the Cannabis Business Times. Let's see, a pound of indoor is going to go for $1,662. That is down $62 from a week ago. A pound of greenhouse weed is going to run you about $1,214. Again, down $7 from last week. Now, a pound of outdoor is going to run you $871. So, I don't understand. Why is outdoor so much more cheaper than indoor, even greenhouse? Because it's almost like a $500 difference. That's a little more than that if we look at the indoor price. Yeah, who can explain that to me? Because like indoor is almost double than what outdoor is. If you know the answer to this, send me an email, send me a text. You can send me an email inmygrow@gmail.com or find us on social media at InMyGrowShow. All right, moving on. A pound of medical cannabis is going to run you about $1,824. But yet a pound of recreational is going to run you $1,268. Okay, another one right there. Why are those so different? Why is a pound of medical so much more expensive? Is it because of the testing? Is there more testing that has to be done? I don't know. I think it all has to be tested the same way out here in California. Once again, if you know the answer to this, let me know. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the benchmark prices of legal weed in America this week. All right, now let's do the report from the Cannabis Frontline. We're going to start off with an article that I found over at the Marijuana Moment. It's titled, Creator of Christian Children's Show VeggieTales Slams Racial Injustice of War on Drugs. And this was put together by Kyle Yeager. Starts out, the founder of the popular Christian-themed children's show VeggieTales recently gave a thorough lecture on the role of the war on drugs in the racial injustice fueling protests across the country. Phil Vischer, whose voice many could recognize as Bob the Tomato from the animated biblical series, hosted a 17-minute Holy Post video that examines the history of policies in the U.S. that have marginalized and disenfranchised Black Americans. It includes an analysis of how communities of color have been disproportionately impacted by anti-drug laws that criminalize substance use, despite the fact that white people use drugs at comparable rates. Now, a quote from the video says, "Then came the war on drugs. Inner-city blacks were extremely vulnerable economically. The overwhelming majority of African Americans in 1970 lacked college degrees and had grown up in fully segregated schools. In the second half of the 20th century, factories and manufacturing jobs moved to the suburbs. Black workers struggled to follow the jobs. They couldn't live in many of the new suburban developments. And as late as 1970, only 28% of black fathers had access to a car. When a white man in Cicero, Illinois, just outside of Chicago, subletted an apartment to a black family, the white community rioted, setting fire to the apartment building and smashing windows until the National Guard had to intervene. And the video ends by saying it may be true that there isn't explicit racism in our legal system anymore, but it doesn't mean justice is blind. It is a truly interesting video that does kind of put it in simple terms of how the war on drugs really did affect communities of color. So I really do encourage you to go find the video. There will be a link in the show notes so you can find it a lot easier. But yeah, check it out and then let me know what you think. All right, the next article comes from the Marijuana Business Daily. It's titled, "More States Permit Marijuana Retail to Sell Hemp-Derived CBD, Creating Added Competition for MJ Products." And this was put together by Ivan Moreno, or Ivan Moreno. No, I think it's Ivan Moreno. It starts off, more states are allowing the sales of hemp-derived CBD products at marijuana stores, setting up a competitive marketplace between growers and producers of both plants that could dent the bottom line of some marijuana companies. Previously, states that had banned CBD in stores, including Colorado, allowed the chemical compound only if it was sourced from cannabis plants with the THC concentration higher than 0.3%. So what that means is that Colorado used to allow CBD to be sold in cannabis dispensaries, but only if it was derived from cannabis itself, and it had to be higher than 0.3% THC. But it seems like a lot of states are starting to change their mind about that, and they're allowing CBD products from hemp to be sold in cannabis stores. Colorado just changed their mind about it, and they're allowing to do it. Illinois is doing it. They tried to do it here in California, but there was a huge just battle between, hemp CBD and the marijuana companies, whether they were producers or cultivators. And a majority of that fighting seemed to be rooted in just marijuana policy. The fact that cannabis is so heavily regulated and that regulation is really expensive. Cannabis manufacturers out here are required to have seed to sale tracking. And there's like a lot of taxes behind cannabis production out here and cannabis sales. And hemp CBD cultivation and hemp CBD sales are a lot less regulated, and they also don't have the seed to sale tracking. And because of that, the cannabis producers and retailers that I've spoken to just really don't like the idea. The only solution that I see is that the cost of cannabis regulation needs to seriously come down. I'm not saying that we should do away with regulation. No, absolutely not. Keep all regulation. Just don't make it so expensive. You got to level the playing field if you're going to allow both types of products to be sold in the same place. Because then it seems like, from where I'm sitting anyways, cannabis producers are at a disadvantage, man. But you know what? I'm going to ask Justin Benton from 101 CBD to come on the show and talk more about this. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about is the latest Gallup poll on morality. And it says, of the 21 issues included in the latest poll, all but 5 have been measured since the early 2000s, and 13 are considered morally acceptable to majority of Americans. Top of the list is at least 7 in 10 U.S. adults say birth control, drinking alcohol, getting a divorce, sex between unmarried men and women, gambling, and smoking marijuana are acceptable moral behavior. Wow, marijuana made the list of acceptable moral behavior. It also says, likewise, 2/3 of Americans considered gay or lesbian relationships, having a baby outside of marriage, and medical research using human embryonic stem cells as acceptable as well. In addition to the death penalty, medical testing on animals, buying and wearing clothes made from animal fur, and doctor-assisted suicide are morally acceptable to a narrow majority. Ooh, looks like doctor-assisted suicide just barely made it. Now, views on abortion are split nearly evenly, with 47% saying it is morally wrong and 44% accepting it. The remaining 7 issues are viewed by majority of Americans as morally wrong. Extramarital affairs are rated as the most morally wrong behavior, followed by cloning humans. Really? Cloning humans? I don't know. I'd like to talk about that. I'd want to try it. All right. Polygamy, cloning animals. Again, I'm a big supporter of cloning. I'd like to talk about cloning animals. Let's move on. Pornography and sex among teenagers. These are the things that are seen morally wrong by a majority of Americans, according to the Gallup poll. There you go, everybody. That is the report from the Cannabis Frontline, and you can find links in the show notes so you can read all of these articles at your leisure. Now, for today's Cannabis Garden 101, I know last week I said I was going to talk about male-female sex and soil, but I decided to split those up. Today I'm going to talk about soil only. Now, mostly because as I'm looking through the notes of male-female plant, I figured that topic needs its own separate show, its own separate time. There's a lot of details that I want to mention. So that's why I decided today to just cover soil, and in a couple of weeks we'll go over male-female plants. So before I get into the kind of soil that I like to use, I'm going to go over the kind of soil that I never use, that I stay away from. And that type of soil is any soil that has time-release pellets in it, like the original Miracle Grow. And that's not the only kind that has those time-release pellets in it, but it's the most well-known, and it's the one that most retailers are going to carry. One, because I don't like the politics of the company that makes it, and the bigger reason is because I have less control of feeding the plant when it has those time-release pellets in there, those time-release pellets of fertilizer in there. Because it's hard to gauge how much nutrients the plant's getting every time I water when it has those time-release pellets. And since I don't know how much nutrients is getting into my plants, it's also hard for me to use any soil amendments that I like to use. Because if I do add too many nutrients, I run the risk of burning that plant, of doing damage to that plant, of even stunting that plant's growth, and possibly even killing it. And also towards harvest time, towards the end of the plant's life, typically if a grower uses any kind of added nutrients to it, any kind of bottled nutrients, we do what's called a flush. We just flush a bunch of water through the root zone, through the pot, because the more raw nutrients that plant is taking during the end of its life, the more of like a bitter, harsh, sharp taste that smoke is going to have towards the end. Is the easiest way I can explain why we flush our plants just before harvest. If that got confusing or unclear at any point, do me a favor, send me an email or reach out to me, and I'll try to explain it a little easier. All right, now that you know a little bit about the soil I don't use, let's talk about what I look for in the soil that I do use. Now, before I look at anything else in the soil, I'm looking at the NPK, which is the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels in that soil, the ratio. And in most prepackaged soil that you find at the nursery, it's going to be clearly labeled. It's going to say NPK, and then it's going to have either like a 10-10-10 or a 20-20-20, or maybe it has, like a 20-15-10. Now, me personally, typically, I like to use a soil that's even all the way across, 10-10-10 or a 20-20-20, because I am going to use this soil throughout the full life cycle of my plant, from seedling to harvest. Now, the bulk of most pre-mixed soil is going to be a mixture called loam, which is just a blend of sand, silt, and clay. You're also going to see some perlite or vermiculite in there, and that's those little white pieces of look like chalk. And they're not really adding nutrients. They're mostly there to help the soil retain moisture and to help with aeration, to make sure that there's, enough air circulating in the root zone to keep it healthy. Now, what I really pay attention to in my soil are the amendments or the extras that a bag soil will have in it. I like my soil to have either a seabird or a bat guano in it. I prefer the seabird because it is more sustainable than the bat guano. But I got to tell you, there is a debate about how sustainable both seabird and bat guanos are because, depending on who you talk to, there is a level of habitat destruction when, these things are harvested, whether it's the caves where the bats are or, the ocean cliffs where the seabird guano is harvested from. So me personally, I like to see it in my soil that I buy. I don't really buy seabird or bat guano, and it's mostly because I'm just of two minds of it. I feel okay getting it in my soil mix, but for some reason I have trouble buying just the amendment itself. For me, if I'm going to buy a soil amendment like a guano that is more sustainable, I'll lean more towards worm castings. I'll add it monthly as a top dressing to my plants as a soil amendment. It's really hard to overfeed your plants worm castings. The only thing about it is you have to understand is that it can be kind of dense and it does clump up when it dries up, when it's not wet. I also like worm castings in my soil because it does add chitin, which helps my plant with its natural pest defenses. Another thing I like to see in my soil is humic acid because it helps plants digest trace minerals like magnesium, calcium, and iron. And it helps stimulate microbial activity, which again helps break down all of the nutrients so they're plant available. Another thing I like in my soil is sphagnum peat moss because it is going to help with water retention and nutrient retention in plants that are grown in containers. Again, there's also a debate with the peat moss, as far as can it be harvested sustainably? Depending on who you talk to, some people say yes, there is a way to harvest it sustainably if you do it in a certain way. Other people are like, there isn't a way to harvest it sustainably since it grows so slowly that at the rate we're harvesting it, we're going to eventually run out in with like 15 years or something. I don't know. I like it. I don't buy it a lot, but I just know that there's a debate about it. And a good soil mix will also be kind of inoculated with some beneficial soil bacteria like some bacillus, which also helps the nutrients become more plant available. Now, the soil that I use, the soil that I recommend to everyone who asks me, is called Recipe 420. It's put together by E.B. Stone. I think I'm going to stop recommending it to people because I can't find it in all of my local nurseries, which really kind of sucks because I needed to get 2 bags last weekend, and I couldn't find it anywhere. I still haven't gotten soil yet. Now, one thing that I have noticed about that soil is that it will feed my plants nice and healthy really well for about 8 weeks. After about 8 weeks, that soil, especially because I'm in containers, is going to be close to depleted, so I'm going to have to start adding soil amendments to it to keep my plants going at a healthy rate. Oh, and a quick note about seedlings. The Recipe 420 is great for seedlings. You don't have to worry about burning your plants. It's going to be fine. The Miracle Grow, on the other hand, because it's so just loaded with nutrients, you do run the risk of burning a very delicate taproot or a very delicate root zone if you use Miracle Grow for your seedlings. Okay, so please don't use Miracle Grow with the time release capsules for your seedlings. They do make seedling mixture soils. Those, I've had really good success with those. So you can try one of those, but don't put it inside a Miracle Grow for your seedlings. You might wind up killing it. Well, brothers and sisters, those are my quick notes on choosing a soil for your cannabis garden. If you have a question or a comment about this episode, do me a favor, send me an email. That is inmygrow@gmail.com. Oh, and really quickly, I want to apologize to everybody. My Instagram account got hacked last week. If you wound up getting hacked because of that hack that happened to me, I'm really sorry. I cleared it up as best I could, as quickly as I could. My account seems pretty safe now, but again, if it affected you, I'm sorry, man. It never happened to me before. It sucked. It took me like an hour and a half to try and get to everybody to let them know not to open up this stupid link. I know I missed some people because days later people were all like, oh, I opened that link. That sucked, man. Anyways, reach out to us on social media at InMyGrowShow. Well, mi gente, my people, that is the end of my notes. That is all I have to share with you today. Do me a favor, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening, leave a rating and a review. Then go over to inmygrow.com, subscribe to the website. Then go over to YouTube, search for In My Grow Show with Alex, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then after you do all that subscribing, do me one more favor, just tell 3 other people about the show. Really simple, really easy. Now, if you are a cannabis company and want to advertise to our worldwide curated audience, let them know what you're doing. Let them know that you're still out there even during the quarantine. Let them know what new products and services you've got available for them. Send me an email, that is inmygrow@gmail.com, and we can absolutely figure out the best way to do that for you. Well, everyone, I'm going to get on out of here because I have to go find some fireworks for next weekend. No, that's not true. I'm not going to get fireworks. Come on, they're illegal. All right, man. Well, I still got to get out of here. You know that I love you all very much. Okay? And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.
a machine. If you're a machine, it can't be so bad, 'cause no one built you to be sad. And in my cold, still heart, I know I was built to be alone. A steel body can't go to hell when you got no soul left to sell. I feel broken and beaten down like I'm chained